The war between the Vornath and the Seracs Empire had raged for years. The Vornath were a proud and ancient race of warriors. They were known for their strength, their courage, and their fierce loyalty to their kingdom. The Vornath kingdom was ruled by King Alden, a powerful leader who had led his people through many battles. His daughter, Princess Serena, was one of the kingdom's greatest warriors. Her skill in combat was unmatched, and she had earned the respect of her people. Princess Serena was not only known for her bravery, but also for her leadership. She led her own fleet into battle, commanding respect from both her allies and enemies. She was young, but her reputation had spread across the galaxy. To the people of the Vornath kingdom, she was more than just the king's daughter. She was a symbol of hope, a symbol of strength. The war with the Seracs Empire had reached its most dangerous point. Both sides had suffered heavy losses. Countless planets had been destroyed, and millions of lives had been lost. The Vornath and the Seracs fought with all their might, and the battle lines had been drawn across the galaxy. The princess led a fleet of elite warriors into the heart of the conflict, seeking to crush the Seracs forces once and for all. However, during one of the most important battles, disaster struck. Serena's flagship, the Vornath Pride, was caught in a fierce storm of fire. The Seracs had ambushed her fleet with a force greater than expected. The battle was fierce, and Serena fought with all her might, but the odds were against her. The flagship was heavily damaged, and soon it was clear that they would not survive. As the battle raged on, Serena's ship was torn apart by the Seracs' weapons. Her crew fought bravely to the very end, but there was no hope. In the midst of the chaos, Princess Serena was lost. Her ship, along with the crew, was destroyed. The last communication sent from her flagship was a desperate distress signal. Then, silence. Back in the Vornath capital, news of the attack spread like wildfire. King Alden had hoped that his daughter would return victorious, but the communication from her ship told a different story. The Vornath fleet was shattered, and the princess was presumed dead. King Alden had always been a strong and proud leader, but the loss of his daughter broke him. Serena had been his only child, and he had always believed she would be the one to carry on the legacy of their people. Now, with her lost in battle, Alden was forced to face the reality that the future of his kingdom was uncertain for days. King Alden remained in his chambers, mourning the loss of his daughter. He could not bring himself to leave the kingdom as he once had. His advisors tried to comfort him, but there was nothing they could say that would ease the pain of losing Serena. The entire kingdom mourned with him, and the people whispered that without their princess, the Vornath would never be the same. The royal court held a public ceremony to honor Serena's memory. The people gathered in silence, their hearts heavy. With grief, the king spoke of his daughter's bravery, of her strength, and of the sacrifices she had made for her people. He declared that Serena's name would live on forever, but even as he spoke those words, he knew in his heart that nothing could replace her. Months passed, and the kingdom slowly began to recover from the shock. The war with the Seracs continued, but with no sign of Serena or any of her fleet survivors, hope began to fade. The king focused on his duties as ruler, but the emptiness in his heart never went away. He ruled with an iron fist, but deep down, he was a broken man. Yet, as the years went on, whispers began to spread across the kingdom. Some said they had seen a woman who looked like Serena, wandering the outskirts of the capital. Others claimed to have seen a ship similar to the Vornath Pride, but no one had concrete proof. King Alden dismissed these rumors, believing that they were simply the work of those who could not accept the reality of Serena's death. Despite his disbelief, the rumors persisted. Some of the Vornath people began to hold onto the hope that their princess was still alive. They believed that Serena had survived the attack, that she had escaped into the far reaches of the galaxy. And although the king refused to acknowledge it, a small part of him held onto that hope as well. Years passed, and the war with the Seracs showed no sign of ending. The Vornath were locked in a bitter struggle for survival. The king had grown older, but he was still a fierce leader. He had made peace with the idea that his daughter was gone, But he could never fully let go. The pain of losing her was something that haunted him every day, and it would never go away. One day, as the king stood on the balcony of his castle, looking out over the battlefield, he thought he saw something strange. A small ship appeared on the horizon, heading toward the capital. At first, he thought it was a reconnaissance vessel, or perhaps a Seracs ship trying to sneak into their territory. But as the ship drew closer, something inside the king stirred. The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen before. It was sleek and fast, its design unlike any known Vornath or Seracs vessel. The king's heart raced as the ship drew nearer. He stared at it with a mixture of fear and excitement. Could it be? Could this ship be the one he had been waiting for all these years? As the ship landed, a figure stepped out, and the king's heart nearly stopped. It was a woman, a tall, strong figure with long dark hair, dressed in armor. The king couldn't see her face, but he knew. It was her. It was Serena. The king's breath caught in his throat. For years, he had mourned her, believing she was lost forever. But now, here she stood, alive. His daughter, the princess, had returned. But she was not alone. Standing beside Serena was a human, a tall, strange-looking man. The king's heart dropped. Who was this human? Why was he with Serena? Why had she brought him back to their kingdom? As Serena stepped forward, her eyes met her father's, and for the first time in years, King Alden saw the spark of life that had been missing from his daughter. She had returned. But with her return came questions, and the answers would change everything. The sight of Princess Serena standing before him felt like a dream to King Alden. For years, he had lived with the heavy weight of grief, convinced that his daughter had been lost in battle. Now, standing on the balcony of his castle, looking down at the woman who once inspired hope in his people, he was filled with emotions that he could not describe. His eyes were wide, his heart raced, and his mind raced with questions. But the biggest question of all was, why was she not alone? Beside her stood a human, a tall, strong man with dark eyes and a calm demeanor, wearing simple but rugged clothing. He didn't look like a warrior, nor did he belong in the royal court of the Vornath. James, that was the name Serena had introduced him by. The king's mind spun with confusion. He could see the affection between them in the way Serena looked at him. It was obvious that this human was not just a companion. He had a special place in her life. As Serena walked toward her father, she kept her gaze steady and confident, but there was a deep sadness in her eyes. It was as if she knew what was coming. She knew the questions, the disbelief, and the shock her return would cause. But she did not let fear show on her face. She had come home, and that was all that mattered. Father, Serena spoke softly, her voice calm but firm. I know this is difficult to understand, but please hear me out. The king stood there, frozen. The woman who had once been his greatest pride was now standing before him. But she was not the same. Her face held the marks of war, of years spent far from the kingdom. The woman who had once been a symbol of strength and bravery was now a stranger in some ways. Serena, my daughter, the king said, his voice thick with emotion. I thought you were lost. I thought you were dead. His eyes searched her face, trying to find the girl he had known, the warrior who had never shown fear. But why did you bring a human here? What is the meaning of this? Serena's heart ached hearing the pain in her father's voice. She had never wanted to cause him more suffering, but the circumstances had changed, and the truth could no longer be hidden. Father, she began, her voice steady, I was not lost. I was captured during the battle. The Seracs did not kill me. They took me, and for many years I was a prisoner. But I was not alone. She turned slightly to glance at James, who had remained silent, standing a few steps behind her, watching the conversation unfold. I was saved by this human. His name is James, and he became my protector, my ally, and my friend. The king's gaze turned to James. He studied the human carefully. This man did not appear to be a soldier, nor did he carry the mark of any known enemy or ally. He seemed out of place, like a piece of a puzzle that didn't fit. How did you survive the war? The king asked James, his tone still sharp but Curious, why are you here with my daughter? James met the king's gaze with calm eyes, never flinching. He had grown accustomed to the looks of suspicion and curiosity that others gave him. He was a stranger in a world that was not his own, and he knew it was only a matter of time before he would have to answer the questions. I was stranded after my own ship was destroyed. James began, his voice steady. I ended up on a battlefield. Alone, Serena found me, and over time, we became allies. I helped her escape, and since then, we've been fighting side by side. King Alden's brow furrowed. Fighting side by side, he repeated, his mind struggling to understand. You helped my daughter. Yes, James said simply, nodding. I helped her, and she helped me. We survived together. Serena stepped forward, her eyes filled with sincerity. Father, I understand your anger, your confusion. I know this is hard to believe, but James is not like the others. He is not like the enemy we've fought against for so long. I would not bring him here if he were a threat. The king's expression softened slightly, but the weight of the situation still loomed over him. He had always seen humans as weak, as insignificant beings caught in the chaos of the galaxy. But now, standing in front of him was proof that even in the darkest of times, things were not always as they seemed. He wanted to reject this idea that a human could save his daughter, that a human could be trusted. But in his heart, he knew the truth. Serena would not lie. The king took a long breath, his shoulders heavy with the burden of his thoughts. So you have come back, but with a human, he muttered under his breath. And now you expect me to accept this? Serena nodded. Yes, I know it is difficult, but Father, this is the reality. This human saved my life, and I have come back to fight. With you, to help our people. The king's eyes narrowed. Fight with a human. He shook his head. How can I trust someone who has no place in our kingdom? James, sensing the growing tension, stepped forward. I don't expect your trust, your majesty, he said quietly. I know I'm a stranger in your land, but I am here because I believe in Serena. She has proven herself in ways that no one else could, and I'm here to support her in whatever way I can. The king studied James for a long time, his eyes piercing. It was clear that the human did not seek power, nor did he want to change the ways of the Vornith. But still, the king was troubled by the unknown. He had never allowed humans to enter his kingdom, and now, his daughter had brought one to his doorstep. You say you believe in Serena? The king said, his voice softening slightly. But do you understand the weight of what she has returned to? The war is far from over, and we are still fighting for our survival. James nodded. I understand. And I'm not here to disrupt anything. I'm here because Serena asked me to be. I only want to help. The king was silent for a long moment, his mind racing. He wanted to push James away, to dismiss him as just another enemy. But deep down, he knew that things had changed. Serena had changed. The girl who had once been a warrior of pure blood had returned with a different purpose, and the human, despite being an outsider, seemed to share that purpose. Finally, the king spoke, his voice filled with hesitation. For now, you will stay. But I warn you, human, the Vornith are not a people to be taken lightly. Serena smiled, relief flooding through her. Thank you, Father. The king's eyes softened as he looked at his daughter, finally seeing the woman she had become. But remember, Serena, you return to a kingdom that is at war. The path ahead will not be easy. Serena nodded. I know, but we'll face it together. The days following Serena's return were filled with questions, tensions, and a sense of uncertainty. The Vornith kingdom had not been the same without its princess. Many had feared the worst. And now that she had returned alive, but with a human by her side, her return was met with mixed emotions. Some were relieved, but many still could not understand why a human would be involved in the kingdom's struggles. King Alden tried to focus on the war, but it was impossible to ignore the presence of James, the human who had traveled with Serena. The king did not trust humans, and the sight of James and his kingdom only added to his worries. Still, there was something about this human that made him different from the others. He wasn't demanding, nor did he try to challenge the king's authority. He simply stood by Serena's side, quietly waiting for his chance to prove his worth for Serena. This time of uncertainty was just as difficult. She had returned home, but it felt like a lifetime had passed since she had left. She had seen and experienced so much during her time away, and now, standing before her father, she felt like a stranger in her own kingdom. She had hoped that her father would understand, that he would see the truth in her words. But she knew he needed time. James, too, was an outsider in a land that wasn't his own. But despite all the challenges they faced, Serena felt a deep connection to him, one that could not be broken by the walls of war or the misunderstandings of a father. As the days passed, the tension in the court grew. King Alden summoned Serena and James to his chambers, where they would finally speak about the future. The war was not over, and the kingdom could not afford distractions. The king needed to know if this human would be a friend or foe, if Serena was to stay and help in the fight against the Seracs. Then James would have to prove that he was more than just a companion. "I want to know," King Alden said firmly as they sat before him, his voice cold and calculating. "Why should I trust you? Human, why should I allow you to remain in my kingdom? You are not one of us. You have no place here." James met the king's gaze with calm eyes. He did not flinch or look away. He had been preparing for this moment since the day he had set foot on Vornith soil. "I understand your hesitation, your majesty," James began, his voice steady. "I know that I am an outsider. I have no claim to this kingdom, and I know that I do not belong here." He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. "But I'm not here for personal gain. I'm here because Serena saved my life, and because I believe in her. I believe in the cause she's fighting for, and I believe that I can help." The king's eyes narrowed. He was not convinced. "Help," he repeated. "How can a human help us? You have no experience in our ways. You do not understand the battles we face." James nodded slowly, acknowledging the king's concerns. "I may not understand your ways, but I understand war. I've fought in many battles, and I've learned much from them. I know strategy, I know tactics, and I know how to fight." His voice grew stronger with each word. "But more than that, I've learned how to survive. And I know that Serena is more than just a princess. She's a warrior, and I will stand by her side, just as I have before. I don't expect you to trust me, but I do ask that you allow me the chance to prove myself." The king was silent for a long moment, his mind turning over the human's words. He had never trusted humans, and he could not easily shake his prejudices. But Serena had trusted him, had brought him back to the kingdom. And in Serena's eyes, he saw a fierce loyalty, a bond that could not be broken. This human, whether he liked it or not, was part of her life now. "You may stay," the king finally said, his voice low and filled with reluctance. "But you will prove your worth, human. You will show that you are not a threat to my kingdom. I will give you a task, a chance to demonstrate your value." James nodded respectfully. "I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust, your majesty." Serena's heart swelled with pride as she looked at James. She knew that the king's approval would not come easily, but she also knew that James was more than capable of proving himself. She had seen his strength, his courage, and his wisdom firsthand. There was no doubt in her mind that he could help them win this war. The king looked at Serena, his expression softening just slightly. "And you, Serena," he said, his tone a little gentler now, "you have returned to a kingdom that is at war. The Vornith need you more than ever. But you will have to prove yourself as well. I will not allow personal attachments to get in the way of our victory." Serena bowed her head. "I understand, father," she said quietly. "I will do whatever it takes to help our people. I will not let my feelings cloud my judgment." The king stared at her for a moment, as if weighing her words. Finally, he nodded. "Good. The war is not over, and the Seracs are not to be underestimated. You both have your roles to play. Do not fail." As Serena and James left the king's chambers, the weight of the conversation hung over them. The king had given them a chance. But that was only the beginning. The future was uncertain, and the path ahead was fraught with danger. They had much to prove, not only to the king, but to the people of the Vornith kingdom. But Serena was determined to succeed. She had returned to her people, and she would not fail them now. James, walking beside her, could feel the tension in the air. He had never imagined that his journey would lead him to a kingdom at war, nor that he would be standing at the heart of a conflict that was much larger than he could ever have imagined. But as he looked at Serena, he knew one thing for certain: no matter what happened next, they would face it together. The days following their meeting with King Alden were filled with tension. Princess Serena had returned home, but the kingdom was not as she had left it. The Vornith were still reeling from the loss of their greatest leader in the war with the Seracs continued to drain the kingdom's resources and morale. There was little time for celebration, and even less for understanding the relationship between Serena and the human, James. The king had given them a chance, but Serena could feel the weight of the kingdom's judgment pressing down on her. The court was filled with whispers, and the people of the kingdom were divided. Some were happy to see their princess return, but others could not accept that she had brought a human into their midst. The presence of James in the capital seemed like a constant reminder of what had been lost and what they had gained. In the days that followed, Serena focused on her role as a leader. The war with the Seracs was far from over, and she knew that her kingdom needed her more than ever. But even as she threw herself into the war effort, she could not ignore the silent judgment she faced from the people of the Vornith. The king had allowed James to stay, but only because Serena had pleaded for it. The human's presence was a constant reminder of the differences between their worlds, and every day was a struggle for Serena to find her place in a kingdom that had once embraced her as a hero. James, too, felt the weight of the kingdom's disapproval. He was an outsider in every sense of the word, and he knew that he would have to work harder than anyone to prove his worth. He had never asked to be a part of this war, and yet here he was, standing at the heart of a conflict that was not his own. But as he looked at Serena, he knew that there was no turning back. She had fought for him when he was a stranger, and now it was his turn to stand by her side. One evening, as Serena and James walked through the royal gardens, the tension between them seemed to vanish, if only for a moment. The quiet hum of the night air and the gentle rustle of the trees created a peaceful atmosphere, but it did little to calm the storm that raged inside Serena. She had returned to her people, but now it seemed like she was fighting a battle she had not prepared for. How could she prove herself to the people who had once loved her? How could she prove that bringing James into the kingdom was not a mistake? James glanced over at her, sensing her unease. "Serena," he said softly, his voice breaking the silence between them, "I know this is hard. I can see that you're struggling." Serena sighed, her shoulders heavy with the burden of her thoughts. "I thought things would be different when I came back," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I would be able to help the kingdom, to lead them in battle. But instead, I feel like I'm more of an outsider than ever. The people have changed, and I don't know how to get back to where I was." James took a step closer to her, his presence a quiet comfort. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. "I'm here, and I'll help you. You've already proven yourself to me. I believe in you." Serena looked at him, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I'm not sure I believe in myself anymore," she replied. "I've come back to help my people, but I feel like I'm failing them." James shook his head. "You're not failing anyone. You're fighting. And that's more than most can say. And you're not alone. I'm here, and so are your people." Serena let out a soft laugh, though it was laced with sadness. "I wish it were that simple," she said. "The king gave me a chance, but I know that many of the Vornith still don't accept me. They don't understand why I brought you back, and they may never understand." James placed a hand on her shoulder, offering a sense of reassurance. "It's not about them. It's about what you believe in. And if you believe that bringing me here was the right choice, then you don't need anyone's approval." Serena looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You don't know how much that means to me," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "But there's still so much I have to prove." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Behind them, the two turned to see a group of royal soldiers approaching. They had been sent by King Alden to deliver a message, Princess Serena, the lead soldier said. Bowing low before her, the king requests her presence in the war room. There is urgent news regarding the Seracs. Serena nodded, her mind immediately shifting to the task at hand. Thank you, she said, offering a polite smile. As the soldiers turned to leave, she glanced at James. Come with me, she said, her voice now firm and focused. I may not know how to prove myself to my people yet, but I will prove myself on the battlefield. James nodded and followed her as she walked toward the royal war room. His heart swelled with pride. He had seen the struggle in Serena's eyes, and he knew that the road ahead would not be easy for her. But he also knew that she was strong, stronger than anyone gave her credit for. And as long as he was by her side, he would support her no matter what. When they entered the war room, King Alden was already there, standing by a large map of the kingdom. His face was hard, his eyes fixed on the enemy's movements. Serena, the king said as they entered, I have a new mission for you. Serena stepped forward, ready to listen. What is it, father? She asked, her voice filled with determination. We've received word that the Seracs have launched a new offensive on the Eastern Front. The king explained, they're gaining ground, and we need to stop them before they reach the capital. You will lead the charge. The future of our kingdom depends on it. Serena nodded, her resolve growing stronger. This was the moment she had been waiting for. I'll do it, she said firmly. I won't let the Seracs take our kingdom. James stood silently by her side, his presence a silent promise that he would fight alongside her, no matter what the king or anyone else thought. The news from the war room was grim. The Seracs had broken through the Eastern Front and were advancing toward the capital. King Alden had called upon Serena to lead the charge against the invading forces, and there was no turning back. The stakes had never been higher. If they didn't act quickly, the Vornith kingdom would fall. Serena had always been a fierce warrior, but this time the responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders. She had led her people in battle before, but now she was not only fighting for her kingdom, but for her own place in it. The Vornith were still divided, unsure of whether to fully accept her return. But in this moment, there was no room for doubt. The war was on their doorstep, and Serena would have to lead them through it. James stood by her side, his presence a steadying force. He had never fought in a battle like this before, but he knew the value of staying calm in the face of danger. He had learned from Serena and the time they had spent together. He had seen her determination, her ability to think on her feet, and he knew that she was the one who could turn the tide of this battle. As the army gathered in preparation for the fight, Serena stood at the front, her armor shining in the pale light of dawn. Her heart was heavy, but her resolve was firm. We will fight, she said to the gathered soldiers. We will fight for our homes, for our families, for our future, and we will not back down. The soldiers cheered, their spirits lifted by her words. They had been waiting for a leader like Serena, someone who could inspire them even in the darkest times. Her return had given them hope, and now they would follow her into battle. James, standing beside Serena, watched the soldiers. He could see the fear in their eyes, but he also saw something else: determination. They were ready. They trusted Serena, and that was enough for him. He had seen what she could do, and he knew she would not let them fail. The army set out toward the Eastern Front, moving swiftly through the forests and hills. As they approached the battlefield, the sounds of war reached their ears: the clash of weapons, the shouts of soldiers, the roar of engines. The Seracs were already here, and they were not going to be easy to defeat. When they reached the front lines, the scene before them was chaos. The Seracs had brought with them a terrifying army of war. Machines, heavily armored soldiers, and devastating weapons. The Vornith soldiers were holding their ground, but it was clear that they were outmatched. The battle was already turning in the enemy's favor. Serena's heart raced as she surveyed the battlefield. She could feel the weight of her responsibility pressing down on her. This was her moment. This was where she would prove herself. She had come back to fight for her people, and she would not let them down. Serena, James said, his voice calm. Despite the chaos around them, we need to make a move. If we don't act now, we'll lose this battle. Serena nodded, her mind already working through the tactics. We need to split their forces, she said, pointing toward a weak point in the Seracs line. If we can break through there, we can flank them and turn the tide. James nodded. I'll go with you. Without a second thought, Serena led the charge. She was fast, her movements precise, cutting through the enemy forces with expert skill. Her soldiers followed her, their morale boosted by her leadership. They fought with the strength of 1,000 warriors, each one determined to protect their kingdom. James fought beside Serena, his sword flashing as he struck down one Serac soldier after another. He wasn't as skilled as the Vornoth warriors, but he had learned enough from Serena to hold his own, and more than that, he fought with the same determination that had driven Serena. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for her. The battle raged on for hours. The Vornoth and Seracs forces locked in a deadly struggle. The air was thick with smoke, the ground covered in mud and blood. But despite the overwhelming odds, Serena's plan was working. The Seracs were being pushed back, their lines breaking as the Vornoth soldiers pressed forward. Serena's eyes scanned the battlefield, searching for any sign of weakness. She could see the Seracs leaders rallying their troops, trying to regroup, and form a new line of defense. If they managed to do so, the battle would be lost. Without hesitation, Serena charged toward the Seracs command center, her sword raised high. She fought her way through the enemy soldiers, cutting down anyone who stood in her path. This is it, she thought to herself. If we can take down their leaders, the rest will fall. James was right behind her, his sword flashing as he struck down another Serac soldier. Serena, we're almost there, he shouted, his voice filled with determination. Serena nodded, her focus never wavering. She could see the Seracs commanders now, their backs turned as they attempted to regroup their forces. We strike now, she said, her voice filled with certainty. With one final push, Serena and James reached the Seracs command center. The Seracs commanders turned to face them, their eyes filled with surprise and anger. They raised their weapons, preparing to fight to the death. This ends now, Serena said, her voice cold and unyielding. Surrender, and I promise you mercy. Fight, and you will die. The Seracs commanders hesitated, but it was clear that their will to fight had already been broken. Serena's presence on the battlefield had shattered their morale, and they knew that they had lost. One by one, the Seracs commanders dropped their weapons, surrendering to Serena's will. The remaining Serac soldiers, seeing their leaders fall, quickly followed suit. The battle was over. The Vornoth had won. Serena stood over the defeated Seracs commanders, her sword still raised. This is for the kingdom, she whispered, her voice filled with pride. This is for our people. The sound of the Vornoth soldiers cheering filled the air as the Seracs forces retreated. The battle was won, but Serena knew that it had only been one battle in a long war. There was still much to be done. But for now, she had proven herself. She had led her people to victory, and that was all that mattered. James stood beside her, his face covered in sweat and dirt, but his eyes shining with pride. We did it, he said, his voice filled with awe. You did it. Serena turned to him, a small smile on her lips. We did it together, she said, her voice filled with gratitude. I couldn't have done it without you, and for the first time in a long while, Serena felt the weight of the kingdom's judgment lift from her shoulders. She had led them to victory, and in doing so, had earned their trust. The future was uncertain, but for now, the Vornoth had won. And that was enough. The battle was over, and the Vornoth kingdom had won. The Seracs forces had been driven back, their leaders captured, and their soldiers scattered. The victory was hard-earned, but it was a victory nonetheless. For Princess Serena, it was a moment of triumph. She had led her people to victory, proving to them and to herself that she was not just the daughter of a king, but a leader in her own right. As the dust settled on the battlefield, Serena stood at the front of the Vornoth army, her eyes scanning the horizon. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the land. It felt like a new beginning, but even as the victory cheers echoed in the distance, Serena knew that the war was far from over. The Seracs were not defeated completely, and the kingdom still faced many challenges ahead. But for now, Serena allowed herself a moment to breathe, to take in the relief that came with knowing that her kingdom was safe at least for the time. Being James stood beside her, his gaze also focused on the horizon. The battle had been intense, and though he was not a seasoned warrior like the Vornith, he had fought with everything he had. He had done his part, and now he too felt a sense of accomplishment. His thoughts drifted back to the moment when he had first met Serena back, when he had been just another lost human stranded in a foreign land. Now, he stood by her side, fighting for her kingdom, for her people. He had come a long way, and he was proud of how far he had come. "We did it," James said, breaking the silence. His voice was tired but filled with pride. Serena turned to him, a small smile on her face. "Yes, we did," she replied softly, "but there's still much work to be done. This victory is just one step in a much longer journey." James nodded. He understood. The Seracs had been driven back, but they were still out there, and the war was not yet won. But for now, there was peace, and that was enough. As the army began to march back toward the capital, Serena found herself thinking about what lay ahead. The kingdom needed rebuilding both in terms of its physical structures and its people. The Vornith had been torn apart by years of war, and many had lost faith in their ability to win. But now, with Serena's return, there was hope. She had proven herself on the battlefield, and the people of the Vornith had seen her strength, her courage, and her leadership. Serena knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be those who still questioned her, who believed she was not fit to lead. There would be those who resented the human by her side, no matter how much she had helped them. But Serena was determined. She had come back to her people, and she would stay by their side, fighting for their future. She would not let the challenges ahead stop her. When they arrived back at the capital, the people greeted them with cheers and celebration. The streets were lined with Vornith soldiers, citizens, and children, all of them rejoicing in the victory. The city had been saved, and for the first time in years, there was a sense of peace in the air. As Serena and James made their way through the city, Serena could feel the eyes of the people upon them. Some looked at her with admiration, while others cast skeptical glances at James. It was clear that not everyone was ready to accept the human in their midst, but Serena remained calm. She knew that time would change their perceptions. She had earned their trust on the battlefield, and in time, she would earn their trust as a leader. Inside the royal palace, the king was waiting for them. King Alden had been briefed on the victory, but he had not yet seen Serena. As Serena and James entered the throne room, the king rose from his seat, his face hard and serious. "Serena," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of pride and concern, "you have done what no one thought possible. You have led our people to victory, and for that, I am proud of you." Serena bowed her head in respect. "Thank you, Father. I could not have done it without the support of our soldiers and the people of the Vornith." The king's eyes shifted to James, who was standing quietly by Serena's side, and the human. The king said, his voice cautious, "What of him? You bring him back to my kingdom, and yet I still do not fully understand his role here." Serena stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "James has proven himself to me and to our people. He fought by my side, and he helped us win this battle. He is not a threat to our kingdom. He is a friend and an ally." King Alden studied James for a moment, his eyes hard and unreadable. "You may have earned Serena's trust, human, but you have not yet earned mine." James nodded respectfully, understanding the weight of the king's words. "I don't expect your trust, Your Majesty," he said quietly, "but I will prove myself in any way I can." The king's gaze softened slightly, though his expression remained stern. "Prove yourself, then. The war is not over, and your true test is yet to come." Serena stepped forward, her voice strong. "Father, I will continue to lead our people. I will fight for our future, for the future of the Vornith kingdom, and I will not fail." King Alden nodded slowly, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and concern. "Very well," he said. "The kingdom needs you, Serena. You have earned your place as our leader." For the first time since Serena's return, she felt the full weight of her father's approval. It wasn't easy to gain, but it was a step toward the future she had fought for. She had returned to her people, and now she would lead them into a new era of hope and strength. James stood beside her, silently supporting her as always. Together, they had fought for the Vornith, and together, they would continue to fight for their future. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, but Serena was ready. She had proven herself in battle, and now she would prove herself as a leader.